Welcome back to the Talking Archive. My name is Josh Jacobs, and we're continuing our conversation with Vicki Cox. Last time we were discussing transmitter power on different stations here in Southern California, including KRLA and KFWB. And Vicki has another story right now from when she was at the big one, 700 WLW.
I don't know how many people know this, but 3 letters in a call letter means you probably were one of the original stations back in the 1920s when stations radio first came into existence. And WLW had, it was like a hoedown station. They'd have a lot of the old-time musicians come in, and they'd do a howdy-doody show and things. But during the war, World War II, they changed WLW to 500,000 watts, 500,000 watts.
Wow.
To try and get to the various parts of the world that they could broadcast to the U.S. strategy, as opposed to enemy territory. Mm-hmm. And it was so powerful that people who lived near the transmitter could get the station in their teeth or in the bed springs. I mean, that's the story that was told, but I believe
it. Yeah, definitely. Kind of like AM signals are powerful as they are. They kind of ride the rails. There was a article, I think it was The World According to ARP, Alan R. Peterson. I forget which radio publication it was. And it was like, radio rides the rails, talking about, for instance, there's this signal in Boise, Idaho, 67 KBOI, which I discovered on my radio one late night because I thought I had it on KFI, but then I suddenly heard oldies station or oldies music. I'm like, wait a minute, what station is this? I want to send an air check here. And it's like, good times, great oldies, 67 KBOI. I'm like, KBOI is like Boise, Idaho. Oh my goodness!
Wow!
It rides the train rails, or what kind of carry the signal around the country. KFI, I heard sometimes it can be heard as far away as Japan, depending on how the pattern and the wind and
I believe it.
All the weather's going. So,
yeah, we used to get fan mail from Puerto Rico and South Florida, all sorts of places around the world.
Wow!
But it was but WLW, they had a 2-story transmitter. This thing was humongous, and it took a lot of maintenance, but it was pretty cool.
Did you ever get to go inside the transmitter and
look
at the inner workings?
Yeah, I got to take a tour of it there, and it was amazing. There's this huge lake out by the transmitter building because it had to go through the water to keep the lines cool. Don't know exactly how they did that. That was out of my field of knowledge, but it's pretty cool.
Wow, and the inner workings of the transmitter itself, was there living space there for the engineer, or how did that look, or is it mainly just technical stuff you remember?
Well, they did have, because it was so big, they did have some equipment there for, like a cot and that type of thing, but nobody actually lived there. It was just they had a lot of stuff stored there as well.
Oh, okay. You never know, because I remember KRLA 1110's transmitter out in South El Monte had like a kitchen and a couch where the engineer could, fix themselves some breakfast and look out over the San Gabriel Mountains. So I wasn't too sure. I read a book years ago called Dream House about the history of KRLA radio. And the author loved talking about especially the transmitters. Whenever he got a chance to talk about a transmitter in the book, he did. Both the location as well as a detailed description about the transmitter site itself. And so I don't remember anything else about the KRLA transmitters, but he talked about other transmitters he had visited, like one in Atlanta he visited, and he said, we heard former KRLA jock Danny Martinez, except he wasn't coming from Atlanta. He was coming from Unistar or Transtar out in Hollywood with a satellite format. But, yeah, I mean, it just – and then, seeing the old KMPC transmitter out in North Hollywood, I think it was on not Van Nuys Boulevard. What street was that? I can't remember now, but I remember seeing that for years, and it having all these cool neon letters, and just some of those transmitters had quite cool architecture to them.
Oh, absolutely.
And did you ever visit KFWB's transmitter? I'm not even sure where that is. Isn't it near Dodger Stadium?
Yeah, it's a ways out. I want to say it's on the top of the hill where all the transmitters are. I'm not Wilson, I think it is.
Oh, okay. I've never been to Mount Wilson myself, even though I've been in
I haven't
radio
either.
for... The people
But
have
I know some of the engineers who've gone out have said, when they had to go out there right after a huge storm or something, like they had to walk through mud for 2 miles to get there because the car wouldn't go that far.
Oh, no.
I don't know if it was true or not.
Well, you never know.
They made it sound like it, yeah.
Sometimes the stories that sound too good to be true really are.
Yeah.
Like I remember one time KKLA radio, this was the early days of KKLA when there were no carts, there was no reel-to-reels or tape cassettes. There was just a board, a microphone, and then they were getting their programming from the Moody satellite system for sermon and teaching programs.
Wow.
And the Moody satellite went out, and the board operator had to do something, so he cracked open the microphone, said this is KKLA Los Angeles, and then he suddenly sings the Lord's Prayer to the tune of Gilligan's Island.
Oh, my gosh.
And he ended up getting fired, but our chief engineer likes to tell that story. And another coworker of mine who was working there at the time said that story actually is true. He really did sing it to the tune of Gilligan's Island. Another time, another board operator, this was by the time they had programming and local stuff, was he locked himself out of the studio. And so what he did was he had dead air, and so what he did is he broke into the station, and he put shaved cream on the board, and he claims that the former owner of the station sabotaged the station or whatever and stuff. Of course, that wasn't true, but I'm like, oh, man, that's just...
Wow.
Yeah. So...
Yeah, that sort of thing will follow you your whole career, I think.
Yeah, I don't know who that was, but that was long before I was even here. It was when the station was down in North Hollywood on the first floor of a bank building, and so that was I never did get to go to that studio, but I don't know, just crazy stories. I mean, just did you ever? Who are you? Who are some of your broadcasting legends growing up?
I lived in Illinois, and I listened to WLS in Chicago a lot.
Oh, yeah.
I loved Larry.
Lou Jack,
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and Yvonne, I can't remember her last name, but she did nights. I went there one day when I was in broadcasting school in Southern Illinois. We had to go to Chicago to take our broadcasting test because that was in the day where everybody had to have a first-class license to operate the station.
Oh, yeah, I remember that. Oh, Yvonne Daniels, was it?
Yeah, that's it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And I listened to them, and a station in St. Louis. The one thing I remember about the station that I listened to in St. Louis all the time was on New Year's Day. So many stations have the rundowns of the songs for the past year. Mm-hmm. And when he got to the number one song, it was Three Dog Night, Bullfrog.
Oh, yeah, Joy to the World.
Joy to the World, yeah. He played it 3 times straight. It stood out to me. It's like, wow! I thought that was the coolest thing that he did.
Well, it's Three Dog Night 3 times in a row, right? I mean, KMOX is the St. Louis radio station. KRLA 1110 out here, I think in 1969, they did a salute to the most rotten records of the decade. And the most rotten record of the 1960s, according to the KRLA listeners, or maybe the programming staff, was "She Can't Find Her Keys" by Paul Peterson.
Oh gosh! There have been some bad ones over the centuries. I don't know.
Yeah, I got a book called Rock Lists. It was kind of a collaboration of Rolling Stone and some other people, and it's got some cool, fun factoids, and they have one of the things they have on there, it's their opinion oftentimes, but the top 40 worst number one songs ever. Some of them I definitely agree with it. One of them was "Baby Baby" by Amy Grant. I'm on agreement with that.
I like that song. I love Amy Grant.
I'm trying to think what else there was. I think Wright said "Fred, I'm Too Sexy" was one of the top 40 worst number one songs ever. Now this was from 1994. I'm sure that maybe they listed "Barbie Girl" by Aqua as another one of the worst top four, or Macarena, which quickly burned out so quickly. I mean, it was just, oh man.
Yeah, those one-timer songs really fade out quickly.
Did you ever see the movie My Fellow Americans with James Garner and Jack Lemmon as two former presidents?
No, I didn't.
It's a hilarious movie. And twice in that movie they play Macarena because that was a big hit song around the time the movie was made. I'm just like laughing at it because, oh my goodness.
Just think of working on the movie, how many times you'd have to listen to that over and over.
Oh, yeah, gosh. Fortunately, with movies, I guess they do, the music post-production, but sometimes I guess maybe they do play it just to kind of give the mood and the atmosphere of what you're listening to, but oh, man.
Yeah, but the production staff and the editors.
Oh.
I
know. Now, did you ever intern before you got into radio? Was there any like mentors in your early days in radio that you looked up to or gave you some great advice as far as radio is concerned? Anything that really stood out to you as far as, here's my advice to you about your career, or maybe something that they did for you, or something like that?
I started broadcasting. I went to a 2-year junior college in Southern Illinois, and the news director there, who was our professor as well, taught me a whole lot. He definitely sent me off on the right foot. I was actually, when I was going to school, I was interning I did paid intern, I guess, at the college. Mm-hmm. I also worked at the station in town, so I'd go from one to the other. But my program director and professor at college was just wonderful to me. And when I was in Cincinnati, my news director at WKRC was just a sweetheart. He was wonderful. He had a lot of faith in me, and pretty much if I had an idea for something, he'd let me go do it. The afternoon news person and I, at one time, there was a 4-star restaurant in Cincinnati, mm-hmm. and he let us go there for lunch to do a review of it.
Wow.
And it was just fun little things like that he would let us do. But he would always give you positive criticism, as mm-hmm. opposed to what most people do, come in and yell at you.
What was his name?
Richard Hunt. And I think he is still in radio. I'm not sure where he is. He works for KLove. Can I say that?
That's fine, yeah.
I think he works there anyway.
That's right. Richard Hunt worked for KLove. I think he also worked for CBN back in the day. I remember that name.
Yeah.
And it's not to be confused with the Muppeteer Richard Hunt.
No.
Who passed away back in about 30 years ago. Mm. I remember Richard Hunt on both KLove as well as, wow, small world.
Exactly. It's so amazing. Radio. They always say radio is such a small world. Don't ever burn your bridges. That's
true, yeah. Because I remember I had something happen years ago where somebody had, basically they I was working for one of the sports radio networks, and mm-hmm. I had just come from XM Sirius, and they said, hey, you want to work for the sports division of our company? I said, sure, no problem. So I got to working there. I was training, and I was traveling 1 hour each way because of traffic, and I was working mm-hmm. overnights at the time. And so I was there 3 hours a day, so it was a total of 5 hours of my time doing this job, and I was going to be filling for one of the afternoon shows there. And then one afternoon, my boss said, well, I'll call you next week and we'll figure out a time to get you some more training. I said, no problem. Never heard back, but I never did call back because I was just so burned out doing all this. And plus, I didn't like the atmosphere. I mean, the atmosphere was so bad it made the Access Hollywood video sound PG rated in comparison. This was how bad it was. And so I was just like, okay, you know what? I'm glad. But then I found out later, I was kind of curious why I wasn't called back. Well, it turns out one of the board operators there had worked also at Salem. He'd been let go from Salem, but he said, yeah, to the boss there, oh, Josh is incompetent. He's no good. I worked with him. But instead of this boss coming to me and, you know, trying to get my side of the story, she just took his word for it. And plus, this guy also snitched on a lot of people and burned a lot of bridges. And I said, look, never hire this guy again, because he backstabbed me, he backstabbed a couple of other people.
Right.
And interesting thing is I got to see that boss a couple of years ago at NBC Sports Radio, because Kate Delaney was driving around town and this person was driving her. And so she didn't recognize me because I was, you know, had long hair instead of short hair, and I was probably about 30 pounds heavier and 15 years older. But it was, I just said hello. Hi, Ann, good to meet you. Acting totally dumb as if I'd never met her before. And so but you know, I just, you know, you just don't do that. You just don't do that. And, so I'm glad that she had a great experience with Richard Hunt. And, you know, we need a lot more Richard Hunts out there.
Absolutely. When I retired, Don Barrett had asked me to do a little thing in LA Radio, a site that he used to run of happenings in radio in LA. And he wanted me to do a little bio of my career. So I did. And I said in there that I had only had 2 good bosses in my entire career, and all the rest of them were just not good. And somebody wrote in it saying, well, it had to have been you if you had all these bad ones. It had to be your fault, not theirs. Okay. Don't know much about radio then, do you? No.
In fact, you know, I've talked with different people, and I did I'm still kind of in the process of editing a book on game show legend Jack Barry. And I was talking with somebody named Terrence McDonald, who's wrote for Joker's Wild when it was on CBS, and then went on to write for Millionaire and Jeopardy, and most recently, gosh, what's the name of that? Quizmasters or something like that. I forget the name of the show. But Terry said to me, he said, look, you know, Jack was a great guy, and I cannot say that about a lot of the people I worked for. Yes. So, you know, that person obviously didn't know what they were talking about.
Yeah, there's a lot of those around for sure.
Exactly. And what's your advice to those who'd like to get into broadcasting?
Broadcasting has changed a lot since I was in it. There's a lot more people who are coming from the internet age, you know, like from social media or having a blog. Or from newspaper. When I first started, you had to have expertise in broadcasting, but that's not the case so much now. But the more that you can learn about all the different forms of media, it's a good thing. And my philosophy was always, because I was in news, you never knew what you'd have to do an interview with someone on live or something. I've always tried to learn at least a little bit out of just about any topic, so I could at least get my foot in there and without sounding totally stupid until I knew what the topic was. And you just have to be, you know, eager to go and go out and do the best you can and still do a little bit better than that. And again, don't burn your bridges, for sure.
Well, and that's you had a career and you're having a career that's been for a long time. I mean, my goodness, over 30 years in Los Angeles radio. Not a lot of people can say that. Yeah,
I've had a lot of good times. I've got lots of good memories, and you know, the rest you just kind of put away with and don't remember them again.
Yeah, I mean, it's sometimes it is difficult to remember, like, okay, focus on the good times rather than dwell on the moments that were not so good.
Right. Unless it's a good story in them, then you try and remember them.
Yeah. Or you kind of laugh about it, you know, in hindsight and poke fun at whatever, what originally got you mad and stuff. I know I've done that with a couple of situations in the past and stuff.
Exactly.
Well, Vicki, anything you want to add to conclude our interview?
I don't think so. You've asked a lot of questions, made me hop around my whole career that I was in for over 40 years, bringing back memories I didn't even remember.
Well, I'm glad.
Voice.
I'm sorry, what?
I said, I'm losing my voice here all of a sudden.
Oh, no. You don't have to work tomorrow, do you?
No, I don't.
Oh, good.
Had to get a drink of water.
Oh, okay. I was going to say, take a couple of teaspoons of honey. Mel Blanc said in his book, That's Not All, Folks, that before he would say yabba dabba do, Alan Freed would take 3 teaspoons of honey. Mel Blanc even would take several teaspoons of honey before he'd impersonate Yosemite Sam, because Sam was always screaming and howling. And he said eventually he was able to develop his diaphragm in such a way that he didn't have to do that when he voiced Sam. But at the beginning, he definitely did.
Well, I have learned a very good thing for your throat because if you have to have your throat, if you can't talk, you can't be on the radio. But lemon juice, a little bit of honey, and mix it all together in a hot drink. It's very good for the throat.
Oh, good. I need to do that because for a while I was pretty much chronically had laryngitis, and it was just driving me crazy.
Yes. Yeah, I understand that. When I was at KRLA, there was a point a few years ago where I lost my voice. I had coughed so much that it destroyed my vocal cords, and I had to have surgery on my throat. And that was a little terrifying, wondering if you're ever going to be able to talk again.
How long were you out for on disability for? Well, not I guess disability, but just not able to be on the radio for.
Yeah, I know it was 6 weeks, and I think it was closer to 2 months to 2.5 months. I kept going in and saying, "I feel better now. I can do it." And I'd do one newscast, and they'd say, "Go home."
Oh man. I know.
I haven't had any problems since then, but I had to have surgery. Wow.
And you got to work with a lot of people at Total Traffic, from Ed McKay, who I interviewed on this podcast about 2 months ago, and Alan Ross got to work with as well. And I just love it. Hello, Carol A. Hello. Hey, man. It's funny. I originally imagined Alan Ross being completely bald on top with wiry Albert Einstein-like hair on the side and a beard. And then when I looked at him, I was like, oh my gosh, he looks like our chief engineer, Bill Sheets, at KRLA. Is like, they look like brothers. I'm like, wait a minute. He doesn't look a thing like I imagined him looking. Of course, it's always that way. You think about somebody looking some way, and they often, like Rod Stewart, for instance, I originally thought he looked like Steve Carell's weatherman character from Anchorman. That's the way I originally imagined Rod Stewart looking. I'm like, that's the way he looks. People used to tell me, you sound so much taller. I don't know what tall means. I'm 5'2", but whatever. And I was envisioning you with red hair, which was blonde at the time. So, well, I imagine Ed McKay being like 6'4", built like a football player, and I was kind of shocked. Like, wait a minute, Ed's not that tall, but he's got the voice of God.
Oh, he does. Yeah, he actually lives about 2 miles from me.
Oh, wow.
Speaking of a small world.
Yeah, because I first remembered him as the announcer of the Return of the Joker's Wild in 1990 that was hosted by Pat Finn. And, before that, of course, he announced a short-lived game show with comedian Hal Sparks called Treasure Mall.
Don't know that one.
Yeah, it was on the summer of 1988. It was during the whole Double Dare craze where they had all these Double Dare imitation game shows. Treasure Mall was one of them. Another one was called Slime Time with comedian Marty Cohen. There was the Fun House, the College Madhouse. Even Pictionary, the game show, had like a Double Dare styled bonus round to see if you'd win the grand prize. And so, Ed said, hey, it was good money, and great exposure and stuff. And
Yeah.
then he went on to announce for a couple of years the Dionne Warwick Psychic Friends Network. So Kevin James and I would sometimes, as a joke, to poke fun at it, we'd play him saying, "What do Yasmin Bleeth and her boyfriend have in the future? Listen to Dionne Warwick right now."
Oh,
and the
he's a
Psychic
character.
Friends Network. He says, but at least they paid him, even though they went bankrupt. I said, I guess they really weren't psychics because they couldn't predict that they'd go broke.
Yep.
But anybody else at Total Traffic that I guess maybe you were reunited with, that you'd worked at other places?
Who else did I work with? I worked with Eric Roy at KFWB, at KCRW, and at Total Traffic at the same time. And Sabina Morrow I worked with.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure there are others, but nothing's coming to mind right now.
That's fine. That's cool. Well, hey, it was great to interview you. By the way, I don't know if you have any kids, if they've gotten to broadcasting or not. Have they?
They're smarter than that.
Oh. Kind of like Ted Zingerbush's kids. One of them almost got into broadcasting, but decided to do some other work as well. I think he's working with seniors now, as far as just senior living and helping seniors, retire and stuff. So he is enjoying that job. But that was probably the closest he got to broadcasting.
Uh-huh. Yeah, my kids, both of them are in engineering. They're as far away from radio as you can get, pretty much.
So they're not radio engineers.
No.
That's cool. Well, Vicki, I appreciate your talking with me.
I enjoyed it, Josh.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And